I believe that you and I got closer together now that I understand your background.
Definitely. And me, yours. My heart breaks for that story. And I see what your dad was doing. And isn't that what we want our dads to do?
Yes.
But imagine if you don't have a dad.
Exactly. Or imagine if you don't know that a Black father could have that strength of character too.
Exactly. Or maybe it's back to what you said, Dr. Weinstein. It's the conversation. Well, it's the courageous conversation.
It's the conversation.
It is the conversation. And Shannon, I want to kind of start bringing this home with another question, and try not to put your legal hat on for this one, which I know is hard. But one of Dr. Nelson's favorite, and Phil doesn't know I'm about to do this, so one of Dr. Nelson's favorite quotes is, "You can't legislate hearts." How do you interpret that?
I was thinking about preparing for today, and I said, you just cannot legislate morality. What are you trying to do? It's true, but it's very true. You can make people conform, but indoctrination can only go so far. They have to want to be better.
Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
I want to go back to your concept of unlawful and unfair.
Unfair. Mm-hmm.
Right? There was a time in the South when African Americans could be lynched and it was not unlawful, and it was more than unfair. And so I take a little issue with whether I understand you live in the world of rules, but the distinction between unlawful and unfair is a little too glib for me. Unlawful and unjust are similar concepts. In one, the law has been set, but the law could be wrong. The rules could be wrong. And I have to consider whether or not the rules are unjust. And that is the higher value that we should be trying to achieve. You're fighting for the same thing. You're saying it is unjust to be able to make a baseless charge just because there's been history of this class being discriminated against, and you happen to be a member of that class. That's unjust. That's why you are so passionate about this. You've seen it over and over and over again, and they're using the law to take advantage of it. But we haven't figured out how to protect anybody from baseless allegations. We haven't figured out how to stop Trump from saying, I didn't lose.
Is that where we're going to go in the conversation?
No. I just think that, when, as you said, when there's no evidence that there was systemic fraud, then why are we passing voter registration laws? I just haven't seen the evidence. And I mean meaningful fraud. I'm not talking about occasional violations or occasional instances. But if we want to step away from that and go back to unjust versus unlawful, I think we can agree, if we've addressed all of the issues of justice, then we don't have to write any new laws.
I don't think that we've reached that point where the laws have fully evolved. And I don't think that we ever will, because as you noted, or maybe Dr. Weinstein noted, we're an imperfect and messy society.
Exactly.
And, the laws will ever change because the values oftentimes change. And so I think that the law will be a constant evolution, but I have to believe that for that point in time, for that point in history, for what's happening at that moment, we're doing a good job. We're doing the best that we can to move towards a place where most of us feel comfortable.
I want to pay you back a little and say, I grew up under a lawful system that prevented me from going to the best school in the city because it was reserved just for white students, but it was lawful. I grew up in a lawful system where my parents could not buy houses in certain parts of the city. And at the time, it was lawful. And yet, I grew up with the respect for the law. And you're right, we are in perfect society, and those laws have changed. There are new laws. Some of the practices haven't changed. And just as there are individuals that take advantage of the system, there are systematic laws that take advantage of individuals. And so, as much as I understand the rule of law and support it and believe that it is the concept that makes our society different, I do not have total faith in those laws. I do not have an unerring, blind faith in those laws. And I understand that sometimes those laws intentionally or unintentionally cause harm and must be changed.
So in case you thought lawyers didn't do good work, this is where the judicial system is that all important and critical check and balance
I totally
on the
agree.
legislative system.
I totally, and I hope I haven't given you the impression that I don't think lawyers don't do good work.
Oh, no, I was speaking to everybody else out there.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you. I mean, we are an imperfect world. We are an imperfect nation. We have an imperfect, but the best judicial system in the world that will take those laws and will, stretch them and eliminate them and contract them and modify them so that we're always moving towards, again, being the best that we can be for most everybody.
It is the only way that a Black man is going to be an American if he doesn't believe in the system. It's the only way that a white woman who also is in that protected class because of gender can protect the system because of the aspirational hope that we can improve that system.
Indeed.
So I'd like to jump in because Shannon, for as long as we've known each other, we really haven't talked much about Shannon. We've only talked about Shannon Esquire. And your background and history is really quite intriguing, having come from blue collar background and living in Mission Viejo. And you made an interesting comment that your dad moved you to Mission Viejo to live, but he still commuted to LA City. Were you the first member of your family to get a bachelor's degree from a university?
That is absolutely true. Yes. I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted to tag seals in Antarctica.
That you told me. That you told me.
And got a history degree, not having any clue what I wanted to do. I figured I'll either be a doctor or a lawyer, I guess. You thought I was joking when I said I'm with a bunch of scientists here. No, chemistry was too difficult. And so I chose the law and forged my way.
So you grew up in Mission Viejo, which in the 80s and 90s, considering the nature of things, did you at any point feel that maybe you didn't have all the opportunities and it wasn't fair because maybe some of the more upper class people seem to have better opportunities than you? I mean, just growing up, did you feel that you had greater challenges than maybe some of your age group cohorts?
I have honestly, Dr. Weinstein, never felt that way in my life. I mean, I hear anecdotally that, it's very difficult to be a woman in the legal profession. I just never thought about things like that. No, it never entered my consciousness that I couldn't do something if I didn't want to do it.
Do you think that was because both your mom and your dad had such a great work ethic that they set an example for you? Plus, you were staying between the lane lines. You would be a perfect swimmer because put you between the lane lines, you're going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But do you think that the guidelines that your parents gave to you made you a no limits person?
Boy, there was an episode that I listened to the other day from your podcast, and it was where Dr. Nelson said, what they see is what they'll be.
Yes.
And it's very much what I saw, just like you said, Dr. Weinstein. My dad was a rule follower. He would know if I was out late. It was all those, it's the way you're raised. And so I know there are those situations, bad childhood, good life, where you pull yourself out of whatever terrible circumstances that you've grown up in, but very much about what you become is your nurture and how you were raised. So that is how I was raised, as a rule follower.
You've got a couple of kids.
I do. I have 13-year-old boy-girl twins.
Yes. And if your twins are anything like my two kids and like Phil's three kids, they grew up saying, but it's not fair. It's so unfair.
Yes.
Do you basically say, I don't care if it's unfair, it's just got to be unlawful or unjust?
Well, that is when I come back and say it's because I said so. That's why.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what the rules tell us. The rules say because I said so. This is the way that it has to be. But again, like Dr. Nelson said, that really cuts both ways. It sets the expectations for the employee, and it also provides the lane lines for the employer. Hopefully, we're all operating within that framework. It's when you have the deviations outside of that there creates a problem. Now, that's not to say that vocal minority that's deviating isn't right. And that is oftentimes when things get changed, things that need to be changed get changed. So I was just going to say, I don't have a slavish devotion to the rules, but now I'm telling you, you can't say anything.
Oh, yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes, you can. But, I grew up the same way you did, except that my environment probably injected in my life a lot more. While you were talking, I thought of an event in my life when my mother is from Hot Springs, Virginia, and we lived in Jackson, Mississippi from 1960 on. My mother still lives in Jackson, Mississippi. When I was a kid, this is before interstates, the drive to Hot Springs to visit her mother was about 17 hours from Jackson to Hot Springs. And my father was the only person in the family who could drive. My mother didn't drive. In order to get there, my father would go to work on a Friday afternoon, come home about 6, and then go straight to bed. And while he was sleeping, my mother and the kids would pack the car, and we would make a bed in the back seat so that we could sleep, then put all the luggage in the trunk. And then about 12 o'clock, my father would wake up, get a thermos of coffee, and we'd start driving. He would leave at that time, not because of traffic, but because the kids would go to sleep, and he could drive for about 8 hours unmolested. But after 8 hours, he still had another 9 hours to drive. Well, one year we went to Virginia for Christmas. We had just driven through Bristol, Virginia. Oh, by the way, the reason he did this was because we couldn't stop on the way. There was no hotel that we could go to. So he had to drive straight through. We didn't even know what a hotel was until I was 9 or 10 years old, when there was a Black hotel in Greenville, North Carolina that opened up, that we finally learned the experience of staying in a motel. But anyway, on this particular trip, we were about 3 hours from my grandmother's on the Virginia border, and it started snowing, and my father was getting sleepy, and he decided to pull over and take a nap because the roads were getting treacherous. He was a danger and recognized it. So he pulled over to take a nap, and within 20 minutes of us being on the side of the road, we hear a tap on the window, and it's a highway patrolman. And my dad rolls his window down, and the patrolman says, "Driver's license, please." And my dad gives him the driver's license. And then he uses the N-word and says, "Why are you on the side of the road?" And my dad explains, "I was getting tired. I had no place to stop. I just pulled over so I could get some rest and I could be safe." And he said, "Well, I see you're from Mississippi, and I don't know what you N-word do in Mississippi with your pickaninnies in the car, but you don't pull off the side of the road here." And he gave the license back, and then he said, "Now move on and get to your destination." And I remember sitting in the back seat looking at my father. When my father got angry, his neck would just enlarge. I mean, I don't know how he did it, but he would just tense. And I could tell he was angry. And my youngest sister was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And she said, Mama, why was the policeman angry at Daddy? And my mother was crying, and I didn't know this. And my dad said, he wasn't angry, sweetheart. He was worried about you. He was worried that a car could come and hit the car. I should not have pulled over to the side of the road. The police are here to protect you. Now, it took me a long time. I remember that story, and every time I told that story, as I evolved, as I've aged, I've gathered a deeper and deeper appreciation for my father and how he taught the respect for law.
The strength of character to be able to come back from a situation like that and diffuse it for your kids is off the charts.
There were other times when he taught me other lessons about the law, but it was all out of the role we expect of the law and the understanding that law officers are imperfect too. And so that's how I approach the law. We have a great system. It's just imperfect. And
and I can see that being your experience and the place that you come from. Most definitely. I mean, I think about when we grew up in Mission Viejo, and when my parents moved here in 1969, there was basically, that's where the 5 freeway ended. There was nothing there beyond that. And there used to be a restaurant called Sambo's.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
what do I remember about Sambo's? They had these great little crackers, right? That they gave as like, whatever, like chips at the beginning or whatever it was. They were like these cute little round crackers. Never did I think in the time that there was something wrong with that.
Yeah.
But that's what history does. It gives us perspective.
Yes.
Because this is 2021 is not 1961.
Right.
And I can objectively say that it was terrible the way he acted in 61 and it would have been terrible today. But we do try and evolve. Most people do, I think.
I believe that you and I got closer together now that I understand your background.
Definitely. And me, yours. My heart breaks for that story. And I see what your dad was doing. And isn't that what we want our dads to do?
Yes.
But imagine if you don't have a dad.
Exactly. Or imagine if you don't know that a Black father could have that strength of character too.
Exactly. Well, maybe it's back to what you said, Dr. Weinstein. It's the conversation. Well, it's the courageous conversation.
It's the conversation.
It is the conversation. And Shannon, I want to kind of start bringing this home with another question, and try not to put your legal hat on for this one, which I know is hard. But one of Dr. Nelson's and Phil doesn't know I'm about to do this, so one of Dr. Nelson's favorite quotes is, "You can't legislate hearts." How do you interpret that?
I was thinking about preparing for today, and I said, you just cannot legislate morality. What are you trying to do? It's true, but it's very true. You can make people conform, but indoctrination can only go so far. They have to want to be better. And it goes back to, you either have it or you don't. It's that intangible. You either want to be a better person or you don't care.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.